Just look at all those cool models, Nick. Paint this. Today we're going to have a chat about painting Necrons for 9th edition 40k 2020. And it's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this... Why is my chair so squeaky? Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. And if you're new to the channel and you want to learn about Necrons and more, then please subscribe and hit the bell button to turn on all notifications so you don't miss an upload. Right, we have got images now of all of the new Necron units which are on the way for Warhammer 40k 9th edition. Although there could be more to come, not only are there a load of new units, but there's also a new dynasty coming, and it's got, of course, a new paint scheme. The Silent King is returning, he's bringing lots of new units with him, and a new dynasty. Now, we don't know too much about the dynasty, the name, or how the rules are going to be, but one could imagine if it's all new stuff from Games Workshop, it's going to be good. So it really got me thinking about how I'm going to paint these new Necrons, and how is this new dynasty and the Silent King's return going to work. Now, I've got a reasonably sized Necron force, just under 14,000 points. A lot of it you can see here, although I have added since this footage. However, I've got my own paint scheme based around when I first started playing Necrons in 3rd edition. There was no dynasties. The 3rd edition codex did depict different ways to paint your Necrons, but they definitely didn't have dynasty codes. That didn't happen until 10 years after they updated my codex. Yes, I waited 10 years to get an update, and when they updated them, they introduced brand new lore, brand new fluff, and also, of course, the dynasties and the Silent King and Catans became Catan shards. Things changed. However, my army is based around the original codex, and indeed my paint scheme is pretty basic. It's basically just silver with some green. Arguably, you could say it's now the Sotek dynasty, sort of, because I do put some gold in there and a little bit of white. But it's not the Sotek dynasty. Actually, I don't have a dynasty name for my army, which I am going to talk about more in a future video. But for now, we're talking about painting, in particular, painting the new miniatures. Actually, I'm painting 2 trays worth of Necron miniatures at this moment in time, and I'm making some painting tutorials, which of course will be on the channel soon. So back to the new release. Now, we know there is a new dynasty coming, but we don't know whether it's actually the Silent King's dynasty. Is he coming back with a new dynasty code? Is his special abilities only going to work with this dynasty code, or is it going to work with the whole of the army? These are questions that we don't know yet. And potentially, some of these new units that you see in the picture here, they could only be units for a particular dynasty code, this new code. It may be that if you play the Sotek dynasty, you won't be able to use some of these cool units. They may only be dedicated to that particular dynasty. We don't know this, but it's questions I have been asking myself. I've also been asking myself, as I'm going to embrace this new release of Necrons, which, let's face it, is very different to what we're used to. However, I'm going to embrace them, and I'm going to try to buy as many of the new units as I can, funds depending, of course. But it would almost be like starting a brand new army. I mean, just look at this force. There's so many new cool units to buy, build and paint. And I'm wondering, maybe I should paint them in this new dynasty colour rather than my traditional silver. 1, it might look cool, and 2, what if the rules are all going to be around this new dynasty? Well, it might be quite good to have them painted this way. However, a part of me is also thinking, sod that. I've ignored all of the dynasty codes so far. I don't really play in tournaments, although I do go to some. I mainly play with my friends at home, and I don't very often play mixed dynasty codes anyway. I prefer to have a single dynasty, but if I do play mixed dynasty codes, there's not too much to worry about when you're playing in a friendly, as long as you tell your opponent which units are from which code at the beginning of the game. However, the tournament scene is different. If you're playing mixed dynasties, you have to have those dynasties painted differently. So if you're playing Novok and Mefret in the same army, you have to distinguish the two different dynasties within your army by painting them differently. You don't have to paint them the same colour as the actual dynasty, but they have to be distinguished in a different colour to the Mefret dynasty. And I am thinking to myself, at some point I will want to go to a tournament, and no doubt this new dynasty is going to be the bee's knees. It's going to be the dynasty which everyone is going to want to play. So I've been thinking long and hard about this since all the announcements, and I don't think that the new units will be locked into the new dynasty code, or indeed only be playable when you're playing the Silent King. I think they'll be free for any of the dynasties to use within the codex. I mean, it just makes sense because they want to sell as many models as they can. So we know that we're going to be able to use all of the new models regardless of the dynasty code that we take. And because of that, mainly, and because also I don't want to be swayed by Games Workshop how I paint my army, I'm going to stick to my paint scheme. However, looking closely at something within the new range of miniatures, I think I am going to have to add something to my paint scheme, and maybe start introducing some fluff to my Necrons. Now, looking at these miniatures here and what we've previously seen released around the new Necrons, in particular the Silent King, well, the Silent King is obviously returning, and he's returning with something. Now, that something appears to be some form of new stone. We all think it's Blackstone, and you can clearly see from the Silent King's throne and those shields there that this stone material is all crackled and old looking. However, if you look at the monolith also has some of this material inside it, and if you look very closely at the Catan, he's got some shards of this stone around those tendrils which he's floating upon. Potentially his wings is also made of this material, but I can't be sure about that. But he's definitely got those shards coming up, which indicates to me that there's a big story around this Catan. If it is a Catan, it may not be a Catan at all. Some people are thinking it's something to do with Sanguinius. I'm not quite sure what, because I don't really know the backstory of that. And some people are thinking it's Oricon. When he's been empowered, he's finally managed to empower himself. But either way, the point that I'm making is that this stone is starting to come into some of our miniatures. Now, not all of the new released miniatures have this stone, but in particular it seems to be on the Catan, the Silent King and the new monolith. And I'm actually thinking that this is not going to be a new monolith. It might be a brand new unit. The monolith may be totally gone, or at least it may be called something else. I don't know, but I have a funny feeling that the monolith as we know it may be gone, because this monolith is obviously something the Silent King has brought back with him, and it's got that black stone material inside it. But putting all that aside, when it comes to painting, I'm starting to think that when I get hold of these miniatures, I am going to paint them in my paint scheme, with the exception of the Blackstone material. I might introduce a green type colour like they've got in the pictures. There's obviously going to be a lot of lore around this big release for the Necrons. It's going to be very interesting to see what that's all about. However, I'm thinking I will introduce this Blackstone into my army rather than just painting it just my normal silver. I think it might add some interest to my army, just giving me that extra colour, but also help me modernise my army as well. However, like I said, I don't have any lore, any fluff for my army. I don't even have a dynasty or dynasty name. It's just Necrons, old school Necrons. But I am thinking I do really need some fluff for my army, and I'm also thinking I might run a competition here on the channel for you guys to come up with a name for my army which is easily pronounced and a backstory for my army as well. Run a competition and give away a prize to the story which I think is the best. So if you're up for that, let me know in the comments box below, and maybe in the future we can run a competition. I'd also be very interested to hear how you plan to paint your new Necrons, or if you've just started Necrons, what dynasty are you going to paint them in? Let me know in the comments box below. Beam me up!